Hello, it is Wednesday and we are live for the view from the top. We've got people coming in from all over the world as we're talking about the really important subject of compensation accumulation and payroll reporting. Not necessarily the sexiest subject out there, but it's one that we all have to do, and it is hugely important, and it is so important to get it right. There's compliance issues, there's all sorts of issues surrounding this, and we've got some amazing technology we're going to be sharing with you as we talk about this really important subject. But everybody, you know how it works. Please join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you're coming in from around the world. I see we've got well over 100 people live out there at the moment, so please do share with us who you are, where you are, what's going on in your world as we go through this important show today. And we've got credits that you can get. So if you want credits, we've got CPE credits. So if you want them from ERC, then we've got the GMS and the CRP credits. We've got credits from HRCI and credits from SHRM, courtesy of our really good friends at Rocket Mortgage. So if you do want those credits, then just write down the right number for your credit, or get your camera out and take a quick pic, or just screenshot it, do whatever you want. Hey to Christopher Barnett from the San Francisco Bay Area. We've got Pankaj who's backstage. We've got Anders from New York City. So people coming in from all over the world, and it's great to see you all. Next week, we've got a fascinating show. I'm super excited that we're going to be talking next week about enabling dual careers in the global workforce. And there's an organization, an amazing organization called the Permits Foundation, that specializes in helping employers, and in particular working with governments, to ensure that both partners can work in the host location. And I'm super excited that we've got the chairman of the board of the Permits Foundation, Jill Gordon, as well as two of the founding trustees, our very own Julie Onslow Cole and Siobhan Cummins, who will both be talking to us, or all be talking to us about how you enable dual careers in the global workforce. So who else have we got coming in from all over the world? I see Russ Haney has come in. Shout out to Russ in Atlanta. We've got Erin from Phoenix. So people coming in from all over the world. But let's move on. Let's just find out a little bit of breaking news. What's been going on in our wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days. So here we go. Here's our breaking news. Hi, well, congratulations to everybody. Hi to, as Dinah says, hi from New Jersey, and Nuruz Mubarak to those celebrating. Yep, absolutely shout out to everybody celebrating at the moment. I'm not quite sure what happened when that video, I think it went around twice. And for the avoidance of doubt, Christina Blondheim is joining RelaQuest, not Asia Talent Mobility Alliance. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Anyway, congratulations to everybody on your moves, on your promotions, and lots of new job opportunities out there too. Anyway, we're going to move on now. We're going to be talking about immigration. And as ever, I'm super excited that we have with us Julia Onslow-Cole to give us this week's update on immigration. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's welcome onto our stage Julia Onslow-Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Julia, we've got nearly 250 people out there listening. So
Great.
Big numbers today. Best live show in our industry. Oh, God bless Jeremy Chanda. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate those comments. But Julia, what are you going to talk to us about today?
So I've got some really important updates from Asia Pac. So thank you very much for my Fragaman colleagues, Mark Buchanan, Becky in China, and also Kenny, who's the leader of the rest of the Asia Pacific. But the really important one that people really need to take note of is for Singapore, because we have lots of viewers who've got big populations in Singapore, and you know that the new Compass system is in effect, and also we were waiting to see what levels the employment pass qualifying salary was going to be, and that's just been announced by the Singaporean Ministry of Manpower. And I'm not going to read out the figures because it's really boring, but in effect it's an over 10% increase. So that's quite high. It's quite significantly over 10%. So this will impact all new hires that you're looking at now to move to Singapore and that are going to start after January of next year. And it will impact.
Impacted by this. Every single new hire is impacted by this.
Yeah,
okay,
for anyone who's starting, which probably, like, if you're beginning the recruitment cycle now and people give notice, it's not unreasonable to suspect they wouldn't actually start to the beginning of next year, but they will be impacted. But also, which is something huge, is that for renewals of everybody that you have in your current workforce, if they expire after the 1st of January 2026, they will be impacted. So just as a reminder for everyone, you've got to get to that qualifying salary. So you have to pay them this qualifying salary, and then you have to go through all the Compass system, which is the benchmarking and the advertising, etc. Now, what we're suggesting is that everybody has a look now at their population, and then see and look and see, how will they be impacted, particularly when it gets to these renewals in 2026. Because as we know, I can't believe that it's actually almost the end of March and 3 months of this year's gone by, but 2026 will be around in a flash. So you really need to actually look very carefully at your whole workforce. And then when you're filling vacancies, you must try and use every tool that you can, like the mandatory job advertising tool, which could potentially yield you some local candidates, and that will also help your benchmarking ratios. So that's a bit of homework for everyone that has a population in Singapore, but it is really important and you should really look at it. The other thing I wanted to say about a big shout out on China is that the China government have been really pushing the boundaries on giving visa-free travel. So it's quite exceptional that they've actually brought change after change after change. And so as an example, you can have a 15-day visa-free travel if you're from Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Netherlands, and Spain. So you can come for business, you can come for family, all for 15 days, no visa required. And then between China and Thailand, there's a new visa exempt process, which is effective from the 1st of March this year. And you don't need work permit approval for working for up to 30 days, which is really, really good. And that can be in a cumulative period. And then the Singaporean and the Chinese government have come to another visa waiver system, which is effective from February of this year, February the 9th. And also the Chinese government have looked at the Hainan province, and they're trying to encourage tourism. And they've got a visa exemption list of 59 nationalities that can go into the province for tourism for 30 days. And the last thing to say is Brazil and China have just signed up this pact, and they're doubling to 10 years the validity of a tourist or business visa. So
Wow.
I don't expect you to remember any of these details, but what I'm trying to say is that if you're looking to send people to China, it's possible that there is now a new visa-free way of them traveling, which will obviously save you time, save you costs. And this is what the Chinese government are doing to try and, boost tourism and also, encourage people to come in to look at potentially working or business opportunities. And then I just wanted to say a very quick minute on the rest of the APAC countries, which the first is Japan. So Japan made this huge fanfare and said it was announcing a digital nomad scheme, but it's really debatable how revolutionary it is. And when we've actually pulled it apart, we actually think it's not very exciting at all. And it's really something that they're calling a digital nomad scheme, but it's actually a patchwork of all the things you could have done anyway. The poor thing about it is salary levels are quite high. You can only come for 6 months, and then you have to leave for 6 months and come back again. And it's really a very small step towards a proper digital nomad scheme. So I think that's, it's not terribly exciting. The other thing is that in Vietnam, people are absolutely struggling with that decree 70. And that was the labor decree, which you might recall was issued in September last year. And it was supposed to help the controversial decree that had gone before it. But although it was supposed to help, it's actually added in a labor market testing requirement. And we're getting literally about 10 queries a day on this because people are very, very confused. And we've given so much feedback to the government saying, how can you introduce something which is meant to make something that was very complex a bit easier and then create all this more complexity around it? So the Vietnamese Business Forum, which we're a member of, we're saying, that this really, needs to be sorted out. And lastly, Indonesia, there's no major changes or updates, but, we've just come out of an election, and it's likely that we'll see a continuation of the former policies. And, but again, Indonesia is another country that we're seeing a lot of interest in. So because we're in a sort of post-election period, that is worth looking at and just seeing what's happening. So that was a bit, sorry, Brian, that was a little bit longer than normal, but we haven't covered it for a while. So it is important, all these updates.
It's really, really important. And, and kudos to you for doing that, a real regional tour de force. So anyway, so a tightening of the regime in Singapore, a loosening of the regime in China, a loosening of the regime that isn't in Japan, and then complexities in Vietnam and changes in Indonesia. So really
10 out of 10 for listening. Well done, Brian.
Absolutely. I knew there was going to be a test. Exactly. So we're going to move on now, Julia. Thank you as ever. Again, we'll see you at the end of the show. We're now delighted to welcome our change maker of the week, and super excited that we've got Stephanie Saxon backstage, who we're now going to bring on. So everybody, you know how it works. We're going to thank Julia and we're going to welcome Stephanie in the time-honored way of hitting the heart button, hitting the like button, hitting the applause button. Let's say thank you to Julia and welcome to the stage, Stephanie Saxon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Brian.
And tell us, where are you today?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Okay. And tell us a bit about yourself and your work experience.
So I have lived in the greater Austin area for 15 years now. I have spent the last 12 years of my career and started in mobility at VMware. So from the infancy of the program back in 2013 up until just this past March. So I've seen the evolution of how we've grown from a small program to over 2,000 assignees over the course of a year. So I have been on the operations side from a technology perspective, supplier management, process, and identifying improvements that could be made for the program.
Okay, and your role there, because there was an acquisition, wasn't there? So tell us a bit about.
Yes, there was an acquisition. VMware was acquired at the end of November by Broadcom, and I helped transition the team over, the team in the program over to Broadcom over the last 3 months. So I am currently on the lookout for my next role where I can make an impact as I did at VMware.
Right. So out in the audience, if you know of anybody who's hiring or wants a brilliant GM specialist, then Stephanie is your woman. So there we go. Christopher Barnett says, "Hey Stephanie Saxon, you look great. Miss you." So there you go. Shout out to you from Chris Barnett out in the Bay Area. So anyway, Stephanie, good luck with your search. But tell us a bit about your passion for technology and why you became a change maker.
So at VMware, I worked with Chris for a number of years with our intern and new grad program, which was incredibly large, which was the first area that we really identified the need for technology from just an integration perspective with our vendor. There was lots of conversation throughout my tenure at VMware about technology, and it's really where my interest has peaked. And along with the supplier management piece of my role, those were my 2 high points that I really enjoyed. And the technology, there's so much opportunity and there's so much room for expansion. And I think in talking with a lot of other companies, there's so many pain points that we all see, and also a lot of wins that we've all had. But sometimes in the mobility space, it's hard to get that prioritization from leadership and that the time and the resources to make those changes. So I say that we saw the biggest need with those intern and new grad authorizations, which is a super simple task, but manually takes a lot of time and bandwidth. So
yeah. So okay. So tech can make your life easier, and I know you enjoy sort of sharing with other change makers questions about policy and they're doing and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong,
Yeah.
and the issues. But I mean, the other thing I wanted to say is that all our change makers, of course, get to choose a charity, and we make donations to the charity on their behalf to thank them for being change makers. And Stephanie, your charity is very dear to your heart. So tell us a bit about the Jessie J Foundation.
Yeah, so the Jessie J Foundation and Sanctuary was founded in honor of my cousin, Jessie Johnston, who died, passed away of glioblastoma, brain cancer, which was very aggressive in her case, back in 2020. The sanctuary sits on her in-laws' property. They built a house where cancer patients, their families, and friends can visit for a time of respite and just reconnecting and being together, aside from needing to be in the hospital or in treatment. It's really a place of solitude where they can just go and be together and relax. And the backdrop is beautiful. It's one of my favorite places to visit in Iowa, and her in-laws are just amazing to have given this and really leverage the loss with building this to welcome families and friends.
Okay, I can see just from your body language how sort of important this is to you and how emotional it is. So if we are helping in just a small way support the amazing work that they are doing with the Jessie J Sanctuary and honoring her memory, then then that's just great and fantastic. And thank you so much for being a change maker, and let's keep on the good work.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're going to move on now, so great having you on the show. We're now going to move on to the subject of comp accumulation and payroll reporting, which is such an important subject, although, as I said, not always necessarily the sexiest subject out there, but we're going to be talking about it. And I'm super excited. We've got some great technology that we're going to show out there. And we've got Pankaj Bhatia and Elena Tershu backstage. And so we're going to bring them on stage. So everybody, you know how it works. We're going to say thank you to Stephanie and goodbye to Stephanie and welcome to Pankaj and Elena. So please, everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's talk about compensation accumulation and payroll reporting. Hey, Pankaj. Hey, Elena. How are you both?
Hey, Brian. All good. How about you?
Yeah, really, really good today. So we've got well over 250 people watching us live and about comp accumulation and payroll reporting. Who would have thought it? Now, actually, I'm going to start off with a question to the audience. And I mean, the question is this, is what is your first reaction when you think of comp accumulation and payroll reporting? What's your first reaction? Now, and do write in the comments box what you think. Now, here are some thoughts, because we actually did do a poll on it. I'm interested to know where the audience is. We said, yuck, it's a nightmare, or I manage okay with spreadsheets, or I rely on my vendors at cost, or I have a really cool no-cost tech solution, which is actually what we're going to be sharing with you today. So feed into the comments box what sort of reaction you have when we talk about compensation accumulation and payroll reporting. So let's hear what the audience have got to say. But let's just start off. I'm in the group when I think of comp accumulation and payroll reporting. historically, I've thought, oh my God, that is a bit of a nightmare. It's a tricky thing. Krishna has said we rely with our relo and tax providers, and I think that's pretty common actually. Is that what people do? Is they just rely on their providers because it's a bit of a messy thing. But before we get into that, I'll just start off with you, if I may, Pankaj. And for the uninitiated, some people know exactly what it is, but for the uninitiated, what are we talking about? What is compensation accumulation? What is payroll reporting? And why is it so difficult?
Right. So I'll perhaps fall in the same category as the poll that you were running, Brian. I think I would have said it's yuck. It's very difficult to do all of that. In my experience in the previous organizations, I went through that. But having said that, to your specific question around the comp accumulation, so the way I would actually define it is putting together all the compensation data from different sources and having the same at a central place, kind of a central repository, a central reporting system, so that we can do the necessary payroll and tax compliances. Now, the reason why I think it's something which has been a challenging process is the process is very, very fragmented. And I would say one of the most complex mobility processes that at least I had seen in my experience. So, some of the complexities, we are kind of talking about different level of data. So starting from the basic component, which is, of course, the compensation or the salary, which is there. On top of that, we have the assignment allowances, the reimbursements, which are coming in, the benefits which kind of come in as well, and these could be non-cash payments as well in some cases, for example, a car benefit or insurance. There are the indirect benefits, which are the vendor payments, example, the immigration fee or the tax filing fee, payments being made all across, right? So you could pay to the employee either in a home location, host location, it could be a third location as well, multiple data sources, right? With the ecosystem that we talk about, right, for mobility, there are multiple vendors who are kind of involved in the full process. So we are talking about multiple reports coming in, different templates being followed by each of these vendors, issues with the data that they provide, right? There are data discrepancies, there are needs for reconciliation because some of the numbers may not make sense. And then there are questions around how is the output which is needed by the payroll team, right? How is that provided to them? So they may have their own set of data fields, etc., that they may define. For example, the payroll codes could be different, or other information that they need could be different. What is very critical is also ensuring the timing of the reporting, right? Because you want to ensure that you get the expenses reported out in time, right? So that's also another piece which is there. So like I said, I think net it's a very onerous process. Historically, what I've seen is that very little automation was actually done in this space to kind of pull together the data. And of course, the more the manual process, the more it is prone to errors, etc. And of course, there's a cost involved as well, right? So if you're having your vendors actually do that, pull that data together, there is always a cost which is associated with that.
Yeah, so if I go back to that poll, I mean, I said, what is your first reaction? And to give you an idea of when we ran it on LinkedIn, what people said is 24%, so nearly a quarter said, yuck, it's a nightmare. 15% said they manage okay with spreadsheets. 52%, so that's just over half, said I rely on my vendors at cost. And as I think, as Krishna said, that's typically your relo and your tax provider. And let's face it, there will be a charge, sometimes quite a significant charge for that. And only 9% said they had a no-cost tech solution. And when I drilled into it, I think most of those are actually people sort of associated with Benivo. Because it has historically been an absolute nightmare. And Elena, from your perspective, what sort of problems have you seen before we move the conversation on? What's your experience talking to clients have you seen historically in practice?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. So I have seen many clients who spend weeks of their time trying to consolidate this data, trying to gather it from various channels, and then check for completeness and accuracy. And the reality is that when the business asks you for this data, they are looking to make a decision immediately. So almost always these requests come as high priority, very urgent. So you don't really have time to be unprepared. And when you present these numbers to the business, you need to trust them. You need to rely on them impacting your mobility budget, or you need to think that there will be important decisions. And at the end of the day, as you know, I work in the client insights department. So this topic for me is just a very good example of a process that requires excellent data management, because this is what it is at the end. Before we talk about insights, before we even know where can we save costs, where can we optimize our policies, you need to have all the data in one place, centralized, readily available, standardized, so you can then dig deeper to understand what you're looking at and what you analyze.
Because we need the information for two reasons, don't we? We need comp accumulation for, if you like, strategic reasons, that the business wants to know what it's costing, what the implications are, planning, all that sort of stuff. But also we need it for reporting purposes, whether it's compliance or indeed payroll reporting. And maybe just going back to you, Pankaj, what's the difference between comp accumulation and payroll reporting? Just explain a bit so everybody understands the terms.
Sure. So I would say, I think while there are different interpretations which are available, Brian, like I explained, comp accumulation is pulling the data from different places, from different sources to one place. And when we are talking about payroll reporting, it's doing something in addition. So you're actually doing an additional process. It could be, for example, maybe doing some tax calculation, which could be maybe certain gross up calculations or gross to net calculation. And perhaps we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a while. Transmitting that data in the necessary templates, adhering to the payroll cutoffs, etc., which are there. And of course, then sending it out for further processing as well, which could include, for example, following country-specific regulations, generating pay slips, etc., etc.
Okay, so tell us a bit more about this. So we've got it coming from different data sources. Explain what all those data sources are. And then, so Pankaj, if you can talk about that, and then I'll go back to you, Elena, talk a bit about how we can actually consolidate stuff using technology. But again, Pankaj, just spelling out the problem. Talk about the sort of the different sources there are and what companies have historically done to integrate multiple sources.
Right. So in terms of the sources, starting with, let's say, the company itself, the employer itself. So the salary information typically will come from the employer. Ideally, this is something which would be part of their HRIS system. So the information getting pulled from that particular system. There could be also instances where there are expenses which are being processed by the employer as well. So these could be direct reimbursements, etc., which are being claimed. Third could be certain benefits. And I did give some examples. For example, they may be paying some vendors or certain insurance costs or providing any benefits, etc. So that's kind of one example in terms of one source of information. The second could be, a provider who's actually making payments to the employee. So that could be for, your relocation allowances, your lump sum payments, or any other payments, etc. The third would be typically your vendors as well. So those vendors, and I gave example of, let's say, a DSP service or a tax provider or an immigration provider. So that is another benefit typically which needs to be reported out as part of the comp accumulation process, needs to be accumulated as well. So that's kind of another source which is there. So largely I would kind of group it into those three buckets. Number one is the employer. Second is a relo provider who's actually processing the allowances, and third is a vendor who's actually invoicing the client for different services, etc.
And if you've got separate relationships with each of those, then you've got a big job to consolidate. Okay, so, and this is, as we talked about, normally a pretty time-consuming and indeed expensive business, whether it's expensive in terms of hours or expensive in terms of cost. Now, Elena, explain to me, how does Benivo change all this? And I know we're very, very proud of the solution. So how has Benivo changed this to consolidate data sources to reduce costs and save, whatever, hundreds of hours?
So one of the things we do at Benivo is we try to leverage as many of the automation tools and systems at our disposal. So we are a technology first company, so we are in a good position to discover and to test some of these solutions. So there's many times when we start this conversation with clients that the general expectation is that we would receive an email with a spreadsheet attached on a periodic basis. The spreadsheet is password protected, of course, for security. But when this delivery mechanism happens, everything is manual, right? It means that somebody needs to go in, somebody needs to be there and not on holiday, or you need a big team behind in order to manipulate this data and transfer it. So what we do at Benivo is, at the beginning in the implementation process, we identify what are all the cost sources, whether they are going to be processed via the solutions we have embedded in the Benivo system, but what are also the external or the third-party cost sources that Pankaj was mentioning. Then we identify who are the data stewards, right? Who is the owner of that data? So we have a direct relationship and connection, and we establish a process for importing using these automation tools. And we work with standardized templates, which then help us automatically run scripts that validate some of this data. We don't want duplications. We want every single cost to be linked to a real relocation. We want the cost to be classified so that it can be normalized and then further analyzed. And when you talk about data from multiple sources, obviously, Brian, I can't tell you in how many different ways I've seen temp accommodation costs being written, right? And not to mention shipping costs and so on. So we try to apply those mappings and that code in order for this to happen as automatically as possible, so that you only need to do then regular sniff tests and sense checks to make sure that everything is coming through properly, right? And once everything is in the central database, then those data transformation protocols are running in the background, and it can flag discrepancies or anomalies and so on. And the output is one simple report. It's kind of the tip of the iceberg, what I'm going to show you today, but all the work, all the effort happens in the background with the use of technology as much as possible.
Because this is something that is ripe for automation and technology. If you think about it, all comp accumulation is, in its very simplest form, is gathering data from source A and dumping it into some sort of repository. That's all we're doing. And
exactly
what we do time and time again is we're shooting out emails to different providers to ask them for the information. They're sending us the spreadsheets. You say we've got to map them. The terms aren't always the same. They might vary from year to year. And it can be a really complex process. But anything, and all that we're doing in doing that exercise, and whether it's we as Global Mobility in-house team or it's us working in a relocation company, all we're doing is taking data and pushing it together, which actually is not rocket science to map it out. And what's cool about this Benivo technology, I think is actually more than cool. It's breaking the mold. It's groundbreaking. Is that this is available at no extra cost. This is just included in the standard license fee. So all those tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours that are being spent can be completely saved by using technology as standard. We've got a question that's come in. We're going to go into a demo in a moment. A question from Monica. She says, so do you use standardized drop downs to avoid all sorts of TH or HHE cost descriptions, or are they still entered manually and you use mapping?
It's a combination, really. So it depends again on the source of the cost, right? And where basically how the data is entered, right? So if somebody would upload an invoice in the Benivo system, yes, we would definitely want to restrict the options that they have and to have dependencies between the answer choices available. But if we're talking about importing data from, for example, RMC, who is running the program, or other third parties, then we would use backend mapping, and we would establish protocols in order for classifications to work properly. So it really depends on the source, right? That's why the amount of work is usually at the beginning, but then once it's set up in a scalable way. So then any changes are kind of future proof, and you just make adjustments along the way.
Okay. And another comment, we're going to get onto a demo in a moment, but let's just take this other comment. Question from Richard Majewski. He said, how important is AI now in reducing the man hours spent emailing out like you just described?
So you will find different opinions here. My opinion here is like any AI models learn from the current practices. So if you currently have rubbish data and wrong classifications, that is what you will be teaching your AI. So I think sometimes it's just going back to the basics, establishing a clear process, as I said, a clear data owners, some validation and restrictive rules before we can talk about AI, because AI will learn from our own data. Once that is set in place and the basics are there, then we can definitely work with machine learning and other algorithms in order for that to be more efficient. Definitely, I think it's a step 1, step 2 type of process for sure.
Okay, and I can see the light bulbs going up and on LinkedIn, and the applause is coming in for this this technology. But so I think we ought to look at it, and because we've got nearly 300 people now watching us live. So let's just look at it a bit and see. So can I see there's a screen here for me to share. Shall I share your screen now, Elena?
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just put this on. Hang on. Here we go. Right. Okay.
Right.
So tell us what we're looking at here, and let's show a little bit about how this thing is done.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, it is a simple concept, right? The most of the work is happening in the background and in the automations behind. But I imagine a world where every mobility managers can come to the mobility platform and go to the compensation accumulation report and then see every single relocation cost that is linked to an assignee. So they can see exactly the date paid, they can identify who that cost is for, they can identify and classify the cost type, they can see what is the amount paid in the currency that it was paid. They can then see standardization by some of the top currencies like US dollars, right? Because at the end of the day, we accumulate costs in a variety of currencies. So in order to further analyze it.
Well, we didn't even sort of mention that before. So not only will it come from multiple sources, but it's coming in multiple currencies too.
Absolutely. So when I want to look at all the temporary accommodation costs or my immigration costs, then I need to normalize it into one currency so it can be analyzed for trends. And then further, we definitely want to be able to track the type of cost. Is it a cash allowance? Is it an expense reimbursement? Is it an expense paid to the employee or on behalf of the employee? And where is it coming from? Who is the supplier, right? So if we have then further questions, how much am I spending with X supplier for destination services, maybe in the same geography? Then I can analyze who is offering better pricing or more cost-efficient pricing compared to other metrics such as satisfaction, SLA adherence, and so on. And then obviously there's other criteria then, looking at the employee demographics as a whole. Where are people moving from? Where are they going? Start dates. So we put a temporal analysis on this cost, right? Costs are dynamic. They're going to change. Temp accommodation last year in California had completely different pricing than today, and so on. So we can look also at evolution of costs and variations. And then obviously, like most dashboards, it's important to be as flexible as possible. If I want to look cost by business units, or I want to look at costs in a certain month or year, it's important to have that flexibility. So once this report is prepared and the foundational work is done, as I've mentioned, every time we would connect a new source of cost, right? We will not always have all the sources on day one, but it's important to have the foundation. So next month, if we want to import tax provider costs, we don't need to build it all over again. We will just follow a similar process of getting the data owner, identifying the templates, identifying the delivery mechanism, and setting it up so that as soon as we start getting this cost, it appears in the report automatically and on an ongoing basis. And then this is one of the things that
This looks cool. This looks really cool. Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, it is not the sexiest topic, and it is an investment. So it's all about data management and so on.
Converting, maybe, comp accumulation was the ugly caterpillar, but, I think this is the beautiful butterfly. This is turning data into wisdom, which is
exactly.
All about. So tell us a bit about this, and now I'm going to start saying comp accumulation is sexy. So start telling me about the beautiful butterfly that you've created here.
Yeah, so now the opportunities are really endless, right? Because we want to analyze the data, we want to extract insights, and the reality is that as mobility managers, we need to make decisions, and the business needs to make decisions. So this is how we talk mobility cost and comp accumulation with our business stakeholders, right? An executive will not want to know about the consolidation process and the validation process and so on. They want to know, how much money am I spending? When are costs going to hit the business? And also, how can I optimize? Where can I save time? Where can I save money? And what does this process do for me, for my organization? So, for example, we have this view, which is one of my favorites, where we're not looking just as, okay, how much am I spending every month, which is relatively basic, but we're looking also at costs on a seasonal trend. So across the timeline, the historical timeline, we're looking at peaks and drops in spend across the organization. And then obviously, again, I can drill down and I can understand by country, by state, where are the peaks, where are the drops. And we actually had a recent client who tasked us to help them analyze when are costs going to hit based on historical data, because it's always a challenge for mobility to explain to business stakeholders that if my budget is 2 million this quarter, and I only spent and processed half of that, it doesn't mean that I'm not using half of my budget. And it's difficult sometimes to explain that that money is going to hit next quarter or the following quarter. So do not cut my mobility budget because that money is coming, and having the evidence to show that is very, very important.
So this is really almost Delphic. I mean, this is turning data into predictive analytics.
Yeah, definitely. And forecasting, right? We need very good data and historical data to go into predictive analytics. We want to start, as I mentioned, with the basics. Sometimes we just want to know am I spending more on certain geographies or on certain policies than others for the same amount of service? How is my spend different by family size or for international moves within a certain region, and so on, right? From there on, as I've mentioned, it's a wonderful world to dig into the data to understand where we can save and be more efficient.
Okay.
And maybe if I can add, Brian, I think a couple of things over there. Number one is, in terms of slicing and dicing the data, even in terms of the individual components that you're spending the money on, the spend as an example, how much are you spending as an organization on temporary accommodation or on shipping, right? You're able to get that full spend. You're able to slice and dice the data. That's number one. And second is, we did talk about the actual costs coming in. The ability to compare the actual costs which are coming from different sources, which we are accumulating, with the estimated cost as well. That's something we've seen a lot of interest from some of our clients. They want to know, okay, this is how much we had budgeted for the cost, and this is my actual spend. So that's kind of another, great reason to, have this.
Okay, so we've talked about comp accumulation, but the other side of this, of course, is payroll reporting. So I don't know, Elena, if you can show us a little bit about how the Benivo technology aids with the payroll reporting. And just for the avoidance of doubt, I think probably people know this, is we're not doing payroll. What we're doing is providing the information that goes to payroll so that the payroll providers can run payroll. So, I mean, should I share your screen again and we'll go into look a bit about payroll reporting?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to switch to the payroll report, but just to give a bit of background, one of the things we constantly hear from our clients is how manual this process sometimes is. Data consolidation, comp accumulation is one thing, but when we talk about payroll reporting, we're talking about different formats for different countries, different payroll codes. We're talking about departments with different interests, and more or less many times mobility managers don't have a lot of impact. It obviously depends on the organization, but if the payroll system only accepts a certain format, there's not much that you can do about it. And you are being left to having to create every month or bi-weekly, depending on the payroll period, and having a lot of responsibility with manipulating this data. So one of the things we wanted to help with is, again, using our analytics capabilities and automations in order to make it as easy as possible for mobility managers just to have dedicated tailored payroll reports in the format and with the payroll coding that is necessary, in order to then simply go and export the report and send it to the right system internally. So an example of this, and
shall I pull it up? Hang on.
Yes, please.
So what are we looking at now?
We are looking at a prototype of a sample payroll report, which I'm going to walk you through. And I want to premise this, that with all the clients that we work with, I have not yet encountered one client who had the same payroll template and report. So
these all need to be bespoke, yeah.
Yes, but what the standard report does is, at the very least, on day one, it would offer you the foundational information in order to build the payroll report that is necessary. So we will see here coding related to payroll effective dates. So we have different payroll calendars by jurisdictions, different cutoff dates, different payroll payment effective dates. So we can automatically code those in. Again, we have the amounts, and generally these are the currency will need to be similar with the destination or the payroll country. Then we have the gross up calculation, which we would like to talk about as well. And then we have the tax position. So the client or their tax provider can give us instructions on taxability, and we can automatically add them in. And we can also support, as I've mentioned, scalability, right? So if a tax position is changing, or if any changes, it's built in a way that it's not going to take months in order to redo and so on. It's just updating rules. And then we have obviously various wage codes, payroll codes, and so on. So all of these, again, are automatically set up by strict rules and robust rules in order for the report to be formatted in the way that is necessary. And really, sometimes, Brian, we have even blank columns, right? So it's data that must be in a certain format, and you need to respect the order, you need to respect the terminology, the classifications, and clients can just simply select their payroll month or period. For example, I will go to March, and then just export as an Excel, for example, set a password, or select which key fields they need to keep, and then export the report for next steps.
Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left. There's so much to talk about. I don't know if we can do this in a couple of minutes, but Pankaj, gross up calculations. Okay, give us like the 2-minute version on gross up and how we deal with that here and tax positions, all that sort of good stuff. I'm sure people are going to be thinking about.
Sure. So I'll kind of give a quick view on that, Brian. So basically, the tax gross up for employees when an employer increases or has to increase an employee's allowance to cover the taxes that will be taken out. So essentially, it's a way for the employer to compensate the employee for the tax amount. So just as an example, if an employee is to be paid an allowance of $5,000 and the tax rate is 20%, now ideally the 20% would be recovered from that 5,000. So that's 1,000. So what the employee is paid is the 4,000. But what we want to ensure is that the amount which is paid to the employee, the net amount which is paid to the employee is 5,000. So the process by which we actually do that, the reverse calculation, is called the gross up. So that's something that we are able to do as part of our process itself. We are able to do gross ups based on the supplementary rate or flat rate, which we will typically agree with the client. So that's something which is included as part of what Elena spoke about. That's number one. Number two is, as part of the payroll inputs that Elena spoke about, we are also able to include the specific tax position for each of the components. So Elena did talk about, for example, a relocation allowance or a reimbursement. So again, the taxability differs on that. So we typically would get those tax positions from the client themselves, because they actually work with, let's say, a tax filer to file the positions, to file the tax return. So we will actually get those tax positions from the client, and that's something which we are able to include as an input, which will need to go to the payroll team, because the payroll team, generally we've seen, are kind of separate from the mobility team, and they'll get the inputs. They don't necessarily know what to do with those specific items. Those are not your day-to-day specific, general payroll items. Those are more specific items. So we are able to include those tax positions also that we get from the client. So that's also included as part of the process. And one last point I wanted to also add over there, Brian, is that, again, similar to the comp accumulation process that we spoke about, if we are doing the gross up as well as part of the process, where typically you would have a vendor charge for those gross up calculation, we do not charge for any of those calculations. That's also included as part of our standard license fee.
Okay, so we're pretty much out of time, but what I'm hearing here is that this is really pretty radical stuff. We've taken what is an incredibly manual process that has typically cost people tens of thousands of dollars in external fees, plus, or maybe instead of hundreds of hours of internal time spent accumulating this. And by so doing, not only is it saving cost and increasing efficiency, it's also allowing predictive and analytics and forecasting and making mobility more strategic, and indeed freeing up time for the mobility function to focus on the stuff that is maybe less manual and more strategic. So huge stuff going on there. And all of this is at no additional cost for Benivo clients. So it is a major benefit over other platforms, other solutions out there. So what we're going to do now, because I'm afraid our time is up, is we're going to bring our wonderful change maker, Stephanie, back onto screen. We're going to bring our immigration guru, Julie Onslow-Cole, onto screen, and of course, the woman who makes everything possible, the fantastic Tali Gorin, onto screen. And all that really remains for me to do is to say thank you to you, the audience, for being with us. Thank you to Alana, to Pankaj, to Stephanie, to Julia, and of course to Tali. We will be back this time next week when we're going to be talking about managing dual careers. And we're super excited. We've got 3 board members from the Permits Foundation. We've got Jill Gordon, we've got our very own Julie Onslow-Cole, and we've got Siobhan Cummins. So we're back again this time next week. This is The View from the Top. I'm Brian Friedman, and all I have to say now is have a great week, and we'll see you all again this time next week. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.